Question 15. A new government policy has been developed to avoid many serious cases of influenza. This goal will be accomplished by the annual vaccination of high-risk individuals, everyone 65 and older, as well as anyone with a chronic disease that might cause them to experience complications from the influenza virus. Each year's vaccination will protect only against the strain of the influenza virus deemed most likely to be prevalent that year. So every year it will be necessary for all high-risk individuals to receive a vaccine for a different strain of the virus. So, first step, argument or facts. Clearly we have an argument. The conclusion is that every year it will be necessary for all high-risk individuals to receive a vaccine for a different strain of the virus. And how do we know that? Well, the premise is that each year's vaccination will protect only against the strain of influenza virus deemed most likely to be prevalent that year. So if you notice the structure of this argument, our premise is that each year's vaccination will protect only against the most prevalent strain of influenza virus. And from that premise, the author concludes that high-risk individuals must receive a vaccine for a different strain of influenza every year. And you notice that that conclusion does not follow from that premise. Just because each year's vaccination will only protect against the most prevalent strain of influenza, that is not sufficient to conclude that high-risk individuals must receive a vaccine for a different strain of influenza each year. How do we know that one strain can't be prevalent in multiple years? So this is clearly a flawed argument. And as we proceed to the question stem, we see which one of the following is an assumption that would allow the conclusion above to be properly drawn. Again, allow the conclusion to be properly drawn. We have another strengthened with sufficient premise question stem. So again, looking for the answer choice that 100% guarantees the conclusion that high-risk individuals must receive a vaccine for a different strain of influenza each year based on the premise that each year's vaccination will only protect against the most prevalent strain of influenza. So let's take a look at A. The number of individuals in the high-risk group for influenza will not significantly change from year to year. And you notice A is completely irrelevant. We don't care how many people are in this high-risk group from year to year. So A clearly does not even strengthen. So how can it strengthen and guarantee the conclusion? So A is out. B, the likelihood that a serious influenza epidemic will occur varies from year to year. Again, completely irrelevant. That does nothing to our argument, definitely does not guarantee the conclusion. So B is eliminated. C, no vaccine for the influenza virus protects against more than one strain of that virus. And C is a popular answer choice among students because C does strengthen. It's basically saying that every vaccine only protects against one strain. So that seems to strengthen the argument because you can't get a vaccine that protects you against 10 different strains of influenza. But you notice it does not guarantee the conclusion that a new vaccine is needed every year for high-risk individuals, because even if every vaccine only protects against one strain of influenza, how do we know that we can't have a strain that was prevalent in one year also be prevalent in another year? So C doesn't address that problem with this argument, so C would be eliminated. Which brings me to D. Each year, the strain of influenza virus deemed most likely to be prevalent will be one that had not previously been deemed most likely to be prevalent. And you notice D closes the gap by telling us if you're deemed to be most prevalent in one year, you are not going to be deemed to be prevalent in any other year. And that would guarantee the conclusion that high-risk individuals must receive a vaccine for a different strain of influenza each year. So D would be the correct answer. Again, 100% guarantees the conclusion in the passage. But lastly, just to make sure here, checking E, each year's vaccine will have fewer side effects than the vaccine of the previous year, since the technology for making vaccines will constantly improve. Again, we are not talking about side effects. E is completely irrelevant, so E is eliminated.